Mornings are better with a warm beverage, even for Latter-day Saints. Meet Postum, the ideal coffee alternative and proud sponsor of This Week in Mormons podcast. Spotted on the coffee aisle at Smith's Grocery or at your local nearby store. Can't locate it? No worries. Order it at postum.com. Explore delicious recipes to tailor your Postum experience. Start your day off right with Postum.
Hey everybody, welcome back to This Week in Mormons with the twin siblings, Melissa and Matt. How are you, Melissa?
Matt. I worked really hard. I knew you were going to say, how are you? And then I always say, hi, Maddie. And then I remember, you don't like me to call you Maddie. You like me to call you Matt. And so I did that. And then I told everybody that I call you Maddie. Hi, Maddie.
I don't care if you call me Maddie. I don't like it when you call me Maddie Gann. That's the part
I know.
Yeah,
because of the old show, Natty Gann. Yeah. Hi, Matt. Hey, Matt. Do you remember clear back when we went to high school together?
I do, yeah.
Because we're less, like it was yesterday. We're less than a year apart, me and you.
Yeah.
So we went to high school together and had a lot of the same friends and a lot of the same experiences, but you were a bad kid and I was a good kid.
Yeah, maybe that's what it is. I remember you making out with a lot of guys, and I did not have that experience when I was in high school.
That is accurate. That is kind of... Yeah. Okay. I'm glad to know that's what I'm known for by my brother. I just bring it up because of our special guest today.
Yes, we have a guest with us today. Her name is Alayna. Alayna, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. So I think I hung more with Matt than Melissa, so that makes me a bad chick. Then
No. Melissa doesn't know.
I'm just kidding. Anyway, yes, we went to high school together, and I don't know, it's weird. We haven't seen physically, I don't believe, each other since high school, but the wonders of the internet and social media, I feel like I've kind of kept track of your life a little bit, at least, Matt. So, but yes, my name's Alayna. Well, it's funny because you did Alayna Fraser Williamson, and that is my maiden name, Fraser. I now have a son actually named Fraser, my oldest. So
I love it.
So when you say Alayna Fraser Williamson, it's like saying me and my son. But you just get me and Alayna Williamson. I live in Kaysville, Utah, so I flew very far away from the nest when I landed. But I think maybe I'll just give you more about me and my life and details as you ask some questions. I think it'll probably organically kind of give you details about me. So I'll leave it at my name and that we went to high school together right now.
So Alayna, I have to ask you this question because this is a story I tell people. Sometimes people will watch the movie Napoleon Dynamite and they'll be like, is that really how things were? And I'm like, yeah, in some ways, Napoleon Dynamite is kind of like how things were. But then I'll be like, but we had this thing that I remember in high school. We had a dance that was called the deer hunt dance. And I asked you to go to the deer hunt dance. I remember this, Alayna. Do you remember how I asked you to go to the deer hunt dance?
Did you kidnap me and put me in a bag?
100% that's what happened.
I need more details. That's my memory, my recollection of.
I need more details.
Melissa, you were actually a part of this. I don't know how you remember this.
Okay, tell me more.
So Alayna showed you this earlier with the photos that she has. So the ticket to the dance was a tag. And on the tag...
Like a deer tag?
Yeah. And so the way the student council set it up was the guy buys a tag, and then to ask the person to the dance, you tag them with the tag. And then
they tag a deer.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
Alayna, you've got the picture. Do you need to hold it up for us for those watching on YouTube?
Yeah. So here we go. Let me get rid of my little orange. And then we also went to a prom together too.
Yeah.
So I've got that picture for later. But here, and so now when I hold it up, it's hard for me to see the camera. There we go.
We can see my hair.
There's Matt's wonderful hair, which I'm very jealous of now. And me. And then here's our group picture. And I even saved the tag.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, the girls are all wearing deer ears.
Yeah, well, so right. You either showed up as a hunter in your orange,
or a deer.
You showed up as a deer. So we've got a few females that are also deer hunters. And I'm not really wearing the orange, but I think Matt, you were, I was dressed as a hunter more than a deer.
Yeah, I think I was the deer.
If I recall. But yeah, I opened my front door and got like tackled and carried down the stairs and put in a bag. And
that's right.
I mean, luckily I get like different times, right? Because now if that happened to my daughter, I think I would lose it, to be honest.
Call the police. Yeah.
But at the time, I don't remember being super scared. I think I was like, oh, this is dance season.
So actually, Melissa was the one. So Melissa knocked on your door and said, like, my car broke down. Can you help me to kind of lure you away from the house? And then we were all in a minivan and we all jumped out and like tied you up or something like that. And then stuck that tag on you. And then that's how we said, please.
And then did you just drive away and leave me to figure out how to get out of the bag? I don't remember that. I just remember being bagged.
We did. We left you there. Yeah. Yeah.
That totally makes you want to date a guy.
I know, right? Like the fact that we actually went to the dance together is questionable on all levels, but it was a fun time and I still remember it fondly. So
isn't it crazy? Like just some of the stuff that you'd have a dance where everybody dresses up like deer or deer hunters. That's kind of an interesting thing. And then asking somebody with the tagging. Because do they still do this in Utah where you do sort of a crazy thing to ask somebody to a dance?
Yeah, I think they do. For at least with my boys, and maybe it was me being like, I'm not going to go to that much work, but they still would do something. But I feel like, the late 80s, early 90s, that was peak craziness for like, you'd go all out.
Yes.
So
like now it's more like a poster with a cute, like, I don't know, pun on it or something.
Yeah, like you're the only fish in the sea or something, and then you leave a bunch of Swedish fish or, something like that. So, which is my style and effort level that I want to put into helping them ask to go to a dance. Although I will say, I was actually just talking to one of my best friends, and her, long story short, her son is turning the age to go to dances, and his buddy was over and he said something to the effect of, if somebody asks me, I'm not going. And she was really proud of her son. And I was too, because he's got 3 older sisters. And he said, heck no, if somebody asks you, you are going, because I have seen the agony and the sadness that my sisters have gone through sometimes when, not asked to a dance. And if somebody asks you, you go. And I was like,
that's right.
Yes, right on. Yes. So I did, maybe that was, I didn't want to spend a ton of money on the asking, because I always would pay for everything for the dances for my boys. And I was like, you will go to all the dances and you won't ask at the very beginning. You'll wait until later on and find out who hasn't been asked and make sure they go. And that's always been my jam, that they need to get out and date and have fun at those dances. Because, if you ask me how much I remember of high school, not much, but oddly, I remember getting bagged and going to the deer hunt.
You're welcome, Alayna. You're welcome for that lifelong memory. Every time I share it, I'm so ashamed to admit it, because they're like, wait, what did you do?
Yeah.
That seems like assault on so many levels. And I'm like, but it was just so fun. Like,
like now if somebody did that to me, assault. But then for whatever, I have nothing other, to explain it other than it was the 80s and 90s, and it was just different back then.
That's just what we did. So, Alayna, you alluded to earlier that you're bald, and that's because you're fighting cancer right now. And I want to get to that in a second. But before we get to that, tell us a little bit about your post-high school life. Like, what did you do? What are your interests? Like, I know the answer to this, but I just think it's fascinating what you do with your free time.
Okay. So, post-high school, I went up to Utah State actually for a little bit of time. So I love Logan. And I met a friend of my husband's. My husband was not in Logan, so we dated long distance for a little bit and then ended up getting married. And I moved to Salt Lake and finished my education undergrad in business finance at the University of Utah.
Can I just pause real fast? Do you know how to become a true Aggie?
I do.
Are you a true Aggie, Alayna?
I am.
Does your husband know about this?
I think he probably knows I am, but it was not with him, if that answers the questions.
Yeah. Isn't that a funny kind of tradition for the listener? So, okay, you can tell me if I'm wrong about this. To be a true Aggie, there's a place on Utah State campus where these A's all meet into a podium of some kind, right? You stand on it and you kiss on homecoming night to become a true Aggie?
That part I can't. I know I didn't go to a homecoming dance, and I don't remember who the person was that I kissed either.
I think there's a couple nights that are designated to be true Aggie night.
Yeah, and you just show up, and then whoever, like, it's kind. If I recall, it's kind of just like a lineup and pick of the, luck of the draw type thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like you're kissing in front of like 100 people.
Yeah.
Like everybody's there and just waiting to kiss at the podium. Yeah.
So if the person that I did kiss remembers me and it feels badly, I'm so sorry, but it was a kiss that meant nothing because I don't even remember who it was.
So my son went to Green Canyon High School in Logan there for a little while, and it has spilled over into the high school community. Like they all want to be true whatever wolves or true whatever their mascot is. And it's like, yeah, sometime at homecoming, everyone shows up to kiss each other so that they can all be true whatever their mascot is for their high school.
Well, and for some of them, I guess if it's the first kiss, like that's maybe a good way to just, let's just get it over with and not agonize over it.
Okay, so you left Logan a true Aggie and then went to U of U?
Yes, and then became a true wife to my husband and finished up at the U, my undergrad in finance, and then I do not have a PhD. I'm very impressed with yours, Matt, but
Thank you.
I have 2 degrees from the U, my undergrad in finance, and then I went back and got an MBA. And every time I was finishing a degree, I was pregnant, and I think I just was like, no more pregnancies. I'm not getting a PhD.
Yeah.
But so when I finished my undergrad, I had my first son, who is now 25. That's Fraser. And then I went back, got my MBA, had my second son, Elijah. And then, so honestly, the first like 10 to 15 years that we were married, one of the 2 of us was in school because I got my bachelor's and my husband got his, and I got my master's, and then he went back and got his master's, and we were always having kids through those. So, but we're pretty rooted in Utah, and it doesn't make any sense for me, maybe someday, but it didn't make any sense to get a PhD from the U and have 3 degrees from the same place. So, but after I finished my MBA, a professor that I had said, hey, have you ever thought about teaching? It would be cool if you came back and taught, just adjunct some night classes. And I thought, no, yeah, sounds interesting. I'll try it. So that was right when I was pregnant with my second one, and he is now 22. So 22 years ago. And after I had him, and which was in the fall, that spring semester, I started teaching, and I've pretty much taught 1 to 3 classes each semester at the U, and also worked a corporate finance career. And then about 10-ish years ago, it's probably been 12, but I went to the U full time and worked in an administrative capacity as well as teaching finance classes. So that's
let me
kind
ask
of my
you
career
about.
path.
Thanks, Alayna. So as I recall growing up, and we maybe had different experiences, but it seems like at that time when I was finishing college, there was this strong kind of like cultural, maybe social pressure for women to choose to stay home and have kids and not pursue a career path. I wonder, did you face pressure like that, and how did you deal with that pressure?
Yes, a lot. I think the biggest pressure that made me choose to work, honestly, was financial. Like we couldn't pay the bills if I wasn't. But then it did for a long time bring me stress and anxiety and anguish. And the funny thing is I now don't have any. I think I'm actually a better mom. I think for some people, I think whatever works is great. I think for some people, if they want to stay home, that's great. If you want to work, that's also great. If you want to have a stay-at-home dad, that's great. Like whatever works for you. But so funny story, the first dance I went to, I can show you a picture. This is my dance album. But the first dance that I ever went to, my mom lined it up, and it was this kid that he was older, and I had a crush on him. He didn't go to our high school, but it was a girl's choice dance. And so she helped me ask him, and we went, and I just, I thought it was really cool. Well, on that first date, the dance date, he told me that he wanted to be a seminary teacher. And I was like, no, I'm no longer interested. So I know, but there's more to the story. So then jump forward, I meet my husband, he had taught early morning on his mission and loved teaching and told me he wanted to be a seminary. And I was like, what is it in this universe that is conspiring against me? But then we liked each other and got married. But when we were kind of moving in that direction, I had some angst because I had been raised and really kind of indoctrinated that you stay home. And I just didn't, no, nothing disparaging, but I didn't feel like living on a seminary teacher salary was the kind of life that I wanted to have or have my children have, that there needed to be. And I remember there's only two, I'll tell you the other time, but I remember having a distinct voice in my head, not the crazy voice that tells me that I need to clean the bathrooms, but like a spiritual voice that said, you will work and it's okay. And yet for still another 10 or so years while working, I felt, and people just comments, and you're not a good mom if you're not home when your kids get home from school, and, all the stuff, which I reject now, because I think it's quality over quantity in a lot of cases. But yeah, I struggled with that for a long time.
Do you sense there's been, go ahead, Melissa.
Well, I mean, I think you were probably going to ask, do you sense there's been a change? I was obviously the same generation as you and had the exact same pressures. And I think the pressures did come from the church. And then you would be sitting in church and you'd get, lessons about things like that. And then that opened the door to people to be a little judgmental, to say those kinds of things to people because, it was taught in lessons and stuff like that. I just wonder if you've had the opportunity to teach other young people now, like this new generation, and how you frame it for them and what you say to them.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, love you, Mom. And she's changed too. But, I think she was even very disappointed that I wasn't staying at home. And she made it clear after, the conference where mothers with young children should stay home, she quit her job. And truthfully, I think that made it hard on us for a long time too. And probably hard on her because I think she really liked what she was doing. But yeah, I mean, pressures that you were not being, a good wife and mother if you were working outside the home. And I do think it's changed. And I am trying to be the change as well. And, my husband works for the church. And when you get hired, and this was also 22 years ago, but when you get hired full time in, I don't know what all positions, but in some positions in the church, you get interviewed by a general authority. And especially when you're teaching in S&I, the seminaries and institutes, your spouse will as well. So I was kind of nervous because I was like, they're going to ask if I work and I'm not going to perjure myself, like I have to say yes. And we had the interview and I told him and he said, I think that's wonderful.
Wow.
That's a good out for you and will help you, I don't remember the exact words, but help you expand your horizons and help you be a better mom. And like, he was confirming, I had heard the voice confirming, but yet the people, right. And now it's a worldwide church and it's not realistic in my mind to tell. It's just in the economy, which I teach finance and economic classes, right? Like in the world that we live in, you're very, very privileged if you're in a financial situation that you can stay home. And I hope that if women are doing that, that they're contributing in other ways instead of just, not just because it's a lot of work being home. And I did it for a while working from home and trying to take care of kids. And that was like really hard. But not just getting up and getting them off to school and then going and hanging out at the gym for 4 hours or whatever,
Right.
But I do think that there's the gospel and there's the culture, and the culture is shifting, but I have had to a few times in my life remind myself that the gospel is true. And I do believe that, but culturally and people sometimes are a little misguided.
Yeah, that's true. I wonder, with you being a finance professor, if you could speak a little bit to, I feel like a lot of times people make decisions, financial decisions, feeling like, and I kind of feel like this is cultural, but feeling like it's okay to take on debt if you're doing it so that you can show that you're living a good gospel life in a way, right? Like, so as long as we're, we've got a mom at home and or we've got, kids doing sports or kids like living the right lifestyle, that it's okay to take on debt. And I see in our culture a lot of debt issues. Do you think that's true? Do you think that's something we need to learn more about?
I think there's pressure. I think it's really interesting. One time, they'll have lots of. I mean, working for the church is interesting, and your spouse is included in a lot of things. And so I've gone to a lot of like general authority speeches, and just different things like that. And there was this one. I think it was a dinner. They have like an annual dinner, but they had a general authority speaking and talking about like, as couples, and we've heard it in the past, not this past one, but 2 conferences ago, like we really need the senior missionaries. And it's funny because a lot of people get to that point, I know this, and are not financially able to go on a mission, or they haven't taken care of their health, so they're not able to go, or they just can't stand the thought of leaving the grandkids. But funny enough, grandkids can come visit you.
Yeah, that's right.
That's like the benefit of, an older mission. You get to live with your spouse and kind of call your shots a little bit more. But the whole reason I bring that up is if you are creating a lifestyle for your kids and going into too much debt early on, it's a concept called consumption smoothing. But like if you spend too much early on, you can't spend later. And I think a lot of couples end up having a lot of problems too, because it's all been focused on the life for their kids. And when the kids move out, they are in financial trouble, in relationship trouble, can't go do the things that they would like to. So yeah, I think that's a cultural thing that, instead of trying to keep up with the Joneses, just be the Petersons or whoever, right? And just do you do you, right? So that is one thing I will say is I feel like Troy, my husband, and I, for the most part, are pretty good at just doing us. And we have our weird hobbies. Matt, I know you were probably wanting me to talk about that too, but we're very into, I'm in no shape right now because I've been recovering from a bone marrow transplant, but hope to get back into shape of doing marathons and triathlons. And all of us are very active, running and biking. Swimming's the bane of my existence, but I'll do it if I have to. So,
but that can be an expensive hobby, right?
It is. And that's another, like we wouldn't be able to do that if I was staying at home. Like my income helps support a lot of our, hobbies, skiing and biking. We were very outdoorsy. And, buying the big van that can haul all the bikes and, stuff like that. So, but I was going to say to my mom too, because I don't want to sound disparaging. She actually told me just recently, she's like, I am so glad that you were inspired to work full time, because through my whole health journey, we've had double insurance coverage, which has, I mean, I know just looking at EOBs, I'm in the millions of dollars now for treatment. And that would have completely killed us, even on, even with coverage, but on one income. So there's reasons that people should think more than just, I need to be there for my kids. There's other ways to be there for your family.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of questions I have, Alayna. So first, I've noticed that a lot of people who I know that are seminary teachers have wives that work. Is it really difficult for, and also I've noticed that seminary teachers sometimes will be told to just move to some other place and they just have to pick up and go. So is it really like, if you're a seminary teacher, you really kind of have to have a second income?
In my opinion, for our lifestyle, yes, you have to have a second income.
It seems really common.
Yeah. For, I mean, they take care of teachers in the sense of like they're paid probably better than a lot of public school teachers in Utah, which is a whole other discussion we could have for another time. Right. But,
Yes.
But it's not a lucrative profession, I wouldn't say, but it's a good profession, and he's done a lot of good and loves teaching the youth. He's at the Institute now at the U, so that, he's loving it up there too. But yeah, I think a lot of people, so that they can, do the extracurriculars and that kind of thing, their spouse will choose to work. I heard one time, since this is kind of, that the podcast is for Mormons. I heard one time that if everybody paid their tithing, then they could pay the seminary teachers a whole lot more. So if anybody's listening, maybe
like
keep
that,
that
yeah.
in mind.
So the other question I have is probably a lot more personal. So you talked about how you had this very clear confirmation from the Lord that it was important for you to work outside the home. But that's not the kind of thing that you can stand up and share your testimony at church about, right? It seems like oftentimes when we have these spiritual experiences, we want to share them with other people. I wonder what it's like to kind of like have a very strong conviction about something you're supposed to do, but have it be contrary to the dominant culture and the people around you. Like, how
Yeah.
did you deal with that?
I wish I could tell you something better than a whole lot of internal angst, but it really I'm finally past that, but I would say it was years and years, and now I just own it. I'm like, you know what? And I think that that's, on the shoulders of giants, right? That there's a lot of other people, but that have, forged the way. But I will tell you too, I remember reading a book one time that somebody gave me, and it was about, like, I don't know, famous Mormons or something. And it doesn't matter who it was, but there were a few women in there who were business leaders, or I think there was a pro golfer. I don't even remember the book. It's been a long time. But I was angry because I was like, here the culture's been telling us over and over and over not to do this. But then yet the people who are celebrated and books are written about are the ones who went contrary to the culture. It just seemed like such a dichotomy to me, and it made me angry. But I do have a couple really good friends, females, that I respect a lot. And if you need more, I won't drop names just in case, but if you need more people to be on the podcast, maybe I can hook you up. But they both are very successful in their careers, and being friends with them and seeing them be successful also in the past, 10 or so years, really helped me come into my own. And I do feel like, hopefully my kids, they seem to be good right now, and hopefully they're good, successful, productive people in society. But I do feel like in my work capacity, I've been able to make a difference and influence people
Oh,
too.
for sure. Yeah.
So mothering isn't always, just your own kids. It can be your coworkers, it can be your friends, it can be, and same with fathering or parenting just in general.
So I think that, and maybe this will lead into the cancer that you've been struggling with. I think that when I was young, I felt like if I know that something's the right thing to do, and I'm making a choice to follow the Lord, then it's going to be maybe not easy, but like feel good all the time, or like it's going to be like uplifting. And it's interesting to me how oftentimes in life doing the right thing is really, really hard and really, really painful, and it's a lot of struggle. And I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about that in your own personal experience with cancer.
Yeah. It's been a long journey. It's not just a recent thing. So about 12 years ago, I had lymph nodes that were swollen in the back of my neck. And I went to a bunch of doctors, and they just kept saying, you have some infection, take antibiotics. Well, the antibiotics weren't working. And then I started noticing lymph nodes in other places that were getting larger. So that's, key sign. If you see a lot of swollen lymph nodes that are not going down, go to a doctor, people. Anyway, so I finally went to a doctor, and he was a family doctor, and he said, you need to get this checked. So I went to an ear, nose, throat, and he said, there's this kind of rare, but it's a disorder where people have bigger lymph nodes, and I wouldn't stress about it. No big deal. And I had to insist. I was like, just for my own peace of mind, will you just take one out and biopsy it and see? Well, sure enough, it was cancer. And it was it's chronic lymphocytic leukemia. So it's a blood cancer, and then your lymph system collects the cancer cells, but can't eradicate them. And so your lymph nodes will get bigger and bigger. And I won the unlucky lottery in the sense that most people who are diagnosed are in their 60s or 70s. And then it's a strange cancer where you let it go as long as you can before you treat it, which I'd never heard of in my life. And so wrapping my head around that at first was hard, because I was like, get it out, and then a few years later, I ended up going through 6 months worth of chemo, but I didn't lose my hair that time. So about 8 years ago, I went through chemo, and knocked it back down. It was starting to be problematic. Like my lymph nodes near my lungs were pushing on my lungs and making it harder to breathe. And you just start getting really fatigued. And anyways, but in between that time when I was diagnosed and I went through the first round of chemo, I had always, like, I had seen the Ironman races on TV and had always been like, that's so cool someday, and so one huge blessing from cancer was you just don't ever know that you have a someday, right? Today is the someday. And so I just was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to sign up. I asked the doctors, they were like, if you feel like it, go ahead. And so then my husband signed up, and that's kind of what got him into him. And now he's done way more than me, and my son's done them. And so anyway, so I signed up for the Ironman, completed that, went through chemo, did a couple more after chemo. But then in the past, I'd say 2 years, it was coming back again. The cancer was coming back and lymph nodes were getting swollen. It was presenting a little bit different this time. I was getting swollen. I had cankles. I'd never had cankles before. I didn't realize I was vain, but I'm more comfortable with a bald head than I am with cankles. So anyway, so that it was getting harder to walk and do, run, especially. And what was the final impetus is one of the lymph nodes in my armpit was pushing on the nerve plexus. And so it was kind of almost like I had a stroke, like my arm was numb and it was hard to use my fingers. And so, I think it was a miracle blessing. My first oncologist had retired, and I was kind of bebopping just with PAs. And then when this all happened, there was another oncologist who I'd never met with, and I got assigned to her. And we did some tests, and she came in and met with me, and said, and her PA was there, who I've known for 12 years. And she said, I never do this, but I'm going to recommend you for a bone marrow transplant. And the PA like looked around. She almost fell over, honestly. Like my husband was like, and at first I was really shocked, because to me, bone marrow transplant means like you're dying very soon if you don't, do this. But I also right after felt a huge peace that came over me as well, that this was the right thing. And she was more aggressive. And then my bone marrow doctor, the guy who's over all BMT at Huntsman, is who I got assigned to. He's a specialist in this. And he was like, he was almost giddy when I met with him. He's like, I'm so excited because I've been telling them, people like you who are relatively young and otherwise healthy, why make them suffer and do this roller coaster with CLL? Like, you live with it, it gets bad, you treat it, it gets bad. And I also am a mutant, which sounds cool, but isn't, because after the first chemo round, I kind of mutated and then became, which is a good thing, like I'm strong, but it made it so I would be resistant to treatment. So they said, we have another treatment right now that'll work, but after that, especially if you mutate, we're not quite sure that we have anything. And they're making strides all the time. So anybody with cancer, I say, you just fight, like just keep fighting, because bone marrow transplant was never mentioned to me before. And now they're writing a paper about me and some other people, right? That this is a treatment to cure. They had always told me it was uncurable. And now I hope and should be cured once everything takes over. So,
wow.
But anyway, so then went through, which is really weird because you go, that doesn't make any sense. But I went through chemo again, this other treatment regimen, and started feeling really good, because they don't want you to have cancer in your body when they do the bone marrow transplant. So they basically wipe out your whole immune system. So they did the preliminary to get rid of it. I was feeling good. Then they did the really heavy stuff and the transplant. And then now I've just been recovering from that. And I actually, today's a milestone. The first 100 days are risky, and today is day 100 for me.
Wow.
So it's been 100 days since the transplant. So
yeah, that's amazing.
So with medical stuff, I'm not very brave, right? Like if they say we're going to put you under for, I don't know, whatever, then I just am terrified I'm not going to wake up again and that my life is going to be over. Or do you ever worry about that kind of stuff?
No, I haven't been to that extent. I won't lie and say I haven't had some very, um, what's the word? Like thoughts of mortality. Like I've definitely thought,
Yeah.
what if I'm not around? Yeah, for my kids and my husband, and um, but I also know it's okay. It's okay. Like what happens is going to be okay. I really truly believe that I'm going to be okay. Um, I don't I don't think cancer is going to be, like, at least not right now, what's going to get me. I'll let it maybe when I'm, 100, but but not right now. Um, which is kind of a segue into, I told you I had two distinct, and I'll tell you the other time.
Oh, yeah,
Um,
do.
so, so I had three boys that are biological. Um, all three of them were a little hard to get here, but nothing that I would say was like, ridiculously hard. But then after my third one, I had two ectopic tubal pregnancies, and they were scary. So I was rushed to the hospital for those ones. Again, didn't think I was going to die. So but I'm very grateful for modern medicine, because my birthing wasn't, they all had some issues, but we got through them. And then tubal pregnancies, they knew how to take care of that. And then cancer. So I'm like, man, I'm glad I wasn't born in like the 1800s, because I would have been a very early death. So anywho, but after the two tubal pregnancies, my doctor was like, and they did tests, and it was like both sides, and it was just weird. They couldn't figure out why. Said, you're probably done. And so for a little bit of time, we were like, you know what? In the world, three kids is a big family. Like, we're done. That's good. I got my three boys. My husband was more gung ho. He's like, we could adopt. And I had heard all the horror stories and was like, no, nope. I don't want like somebody, I don't want to turn into a convict, run into Canada if somebody comes to try and take the baby back, or, anything like that. Now I'm a huge advocate for adoption, by the way, but I was just like, no. And then, in the middle of the night, one night I woke up and I heard the voice again, and it said, Alayna, you have a baby waiting, and the birth mom is going to pick you and tell you you're the perfect family.
Mm.
And I was like, and so then it was my mission, right? So I woke my husband up, and he's like, okay. And, another crazy Alayna moment. And I was like, because I felt like the baby was already born. And so what normally takes people like 6 months to get their adoption paperwork together, I had it done in like 6 weeks. And things
Wow.
like you have to take classes at the state, and they were full. But then they called me that a couple had dropped out, and we had to show up like 2 days later. I mean, just everything was falling into place, because I knew, like, I'm going to get the baby. And then, crazy enough, the day after, and you guys think it's going to be mine, but it wasn't. The day after our file was approved, they called and they said, hey, we have a baby that needs a home. And it killed me. It was born with Down syndrome, and now the family that the birth mom had picked doesn't want it, which I just was like, wanted to strangle that family. And so I should tell you, before, when we were filling out the papers, you can on paper say, we only want a girl, we only want a boy, we only want, this race or whatever. And my three boys, who were relatively young at the time, we said, should we say that we only want a girl or only want a boy? And one of them said, God didn't let you pick us, so why can you pick now? And I was like, from the mouth of babes, right? And so we just trusted the Lord and said, whatever we're going to get sent. Like, so we said we'd accept one with disabilities, but the problem with, and I just had the voice and knew when they called, they were looking for somebody. It wasn't the birth parent picking us. And so I told our caseworker, I was like, I would take the baby, and if you don't have another family, you call me back. But I just isn't the way it's supposed to work, which I'm sure she was like, whatever, but it wasn't the way it was supposed to work. And so, and I did check in like multiple times, and they found another family that had another Down syndrome child. And that was the perfect family for this space. She reassured me many times, because I didn't just believe her the first time. but it kind of killed me because I was like, I did all this work and the next day you call. And so then it was over a year, and we heard nothing. And nobody looked at our file that I know of. Nobody was interested. And I was starting to get frustrated. And this was back when that movie Juno came out. And I remember watching Juno. And sorry, I'm going to say a swear word, but I was like, I am not going to put an ad in the damn penny saver. Like, that is not how this is supposed to work, So I called the caseworker and she's like, you really just have to get the word out there. You just have to get the word out. And so a new semester was starting and I didn't like go on and on. I just said, my name, and I'm married and I have 3 boys and we have papers out to adopt. And hopefully at some point this semester, I tell you, I have a new baby, but well, all things as scheduled. And then the next week, a girl came up with a piece of paper with a phone number on it. And she said, my husband took your class way back. He's told me all about you, which was like, all about, like, what all about me, it's not like I tell them my whole life story, but, and she said he works with a girl who just told him that she's pregnant and she can't raise the child. And she, is expecting you to call her. And I was like, am I being punked right now? Like,
wow.
But I called her and I went to lunch with her and we talked for hours. And I thought it would be like, I meet her, then she meets Troy, then she meets my kids, and she agonizes about the decision. But at that lunch, she pulled out ultrasound where it looks like, a little bean. There was no, and because she didn't even look pregnant either. That was the crazy thing. She was only a couple months along. And she pulled out pictures and said, here's your baby. You guys are the perfect family for this child. So anyway, so I do think that inspiration is real and that the Holy Ghost speaks to us. God speaks to us through the Holy Ghost, and we have heavenly parents that love us and watch out for us. And if you trust that voice that's not your own voice, it's trying to guide you. It's just that I think a lot of times we, in the first, you should work, and yet I still like agonized about it. And people thought I was crazy the second time turning down a baby, but I was like, this is how it's supposed to work. And I know that's how it's supposed to work. So anyway.
And I find like that's how life is, right? Like, you had these experiences when you were younger to help you hear and understand. I mean, if you hadn't have listened to the voice the first time, you wouldn't have been in the position where you could find that baby, right? The second time. But I really think like God's plan is so beautiful and so individual for each of us. And we have to have those times where we learn how to hear his voice, where we learn how to hear what he's teaching us to do. And it doesn't always mean that it's easy to accept. Like you were saying, Matt, it doesn't always mean that it makes sense or that it's easier, but that's really what life is learning how to connect with that.
Yeah. And that's why I went on that tangent, actually, to come full circle with your question is, hard things. I've had a couple miscarriages and a couple tubal pregnancies, and those are hard, right? But I would never have thought of adopting or been open to it if those hadn't happened. And cancer's hard, but I wouldn't wish it on anybody. I really, really wouldn't, not even, my worst enemy. But there's been a lot of blessings, and I've learned things, and I value life more, and I value and cherish time with my kids. And why I started telling you that second story is I really feel like I'm supposed to raise my daughter that I heard the voice about, right? And cancer's not going to get me because I am her mom and I was supposed to raise her. And I feel like she's kind of like a little insurance policy too. So yes, I worry, but I don't also. Right when I was first diagnosed, I remember having a Relief Society lesson, and it was all about like trusting God and that whatever is supposed to happen will happen. And I don't know what the conference talk was, but somebody who talked about their wife passing from cancer, and I had to get up and walk out of the room. Like I was just like, I am not anywhere near that. And I'm not going to just, I'm going to fight this. I'm a little feisty. But now I am better at being like, okay, everything's going to be okay. And life is hard. And the older you get, I don't know if it just gets harder or you start to realize all the hard. I think it's the second.
Well, that's interesting because I'm often in like Sunday school classes or church classes, and people will say, what are the blessings you get from paying tithing? Or what are the blessings you get from the word of wisdom? And I think, Alayna, you just sort of summed it all up, right? That assurance that you have that everything's going to be okay. And the assurance that you get that even though I don't know all the answers to certain things, I have some things that I've got strong assurance of. That's something that a lot of people in this world don't have. And to me, that's like the best, like my most favorite thing from the gospel of Jesus Christ is that I can have some assurance about some things because I'm kind of like prone to anxiety. And so just kind of knowing sometimes like everything's going to be okay makes it so that all of the other worries just don't get you down.
Yeah. And you still have to like ground yourself sometimes. I don't want you to think
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't
yeah.
have anxiety, and I do, and I worry, but those are usually temporal and shorter term. And if you take yourself back and take a step back, then you realize, okay, like I'll have my family with me forever, and this too shall pass type stuff. It's hard when you're in that anxiety moment, but I mean, even Iron Man. I don't know. I probably would have been saying someday, still today, if that hadn't happened. And then I was like, you know what? Now is someday, and I will not go into huge debt, but I'll buy a little bit nicer things, or I'll use the China or whatever, just because, like, what are you waiting for?
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
it might not happen if you don't do it now. And so, go on the vacations and I am not going to teach finance, but consumption smoothing is, that's what it is, like enjoying all points in your life, not saving so much in the beginning that you have a mediocre life to have something great in the future, which might not happen, but also not spending so much now that you have a miserable time in the future, like all things in moderation, so I think what do they say? All truth can be circumscribed into one great whole, right? But financial truth is truth. And that is all part of, the whole truth type thing. So
That's awesome. Alayna, it has been so good visiting with you. Listeners, thanks so much for letting me catch up with Alayna from our high school days. I'm going to try and sum up what I learned from you, Alayna. It's that if there's a young girl out there who's in love with a guy who wants to be a seminary teacher, that's okay. It can still work out okay.
that can. But
Great summary.
you should still, here we go. Here's the other one. Again, prom. You should still go out on the dates with all the other people too, because you'll
That's
have a
right.
great time there. So there's the prom picture.
That's
So
awesome.
cute.
Can I just share one other story that I have leaned on so many times? That because I don't want you to think that there haven't been rough times, and sometimes having a husband work for the church where there's people is hard. And there was a time, I've always been active, but there was a time where I felt like, holding on to the iron rod. I wasn't clutching it. I was kind of like plugging my nose and touching it. I was pretty upset at a few things, mostly people. And I went to Relief Society, and I was annoyed to be there. And the teacher gave a lesson that I don't even remember all of the jars, but she brought in mason jars, and she had different things that she put in the jars. And two that I remember, which number one for me is like, this isn't something that keeps me up at night, but I'm sure it does for other people. And she put in like 3 different Barbie dolls and then sealed it up really, really tight. And she's like, polygamy. Sometimes people have a really hard time with polygamy. And she's like, just put it in the jar, seal it up, put it up on the shelf. And then she had another jar, and she put in little Lego people. And she was like, people. Sometimes people have a really hard time with other people. Just put it in the jar. So, and then she talked about these other jars that I don't remember. Mine was the people jar. And then she came back, and she's like, and sometimes you're going to have to grab that jar off the shelf and tighten the lid even tighter and put it back up. And I can't tell you how many times I have tightened the lid on a jar. And so I life is hard sometimes, but you just, buckle up, pull those bootstraps up, whatever adage you want, tighten the jar lid, and just know that things will be okay. So you can keep summarizing that, but things will be okay, and you tighten the jar lid. So
yeah, that was beautiful.
Yeah, I'm definitely not going to try and summarize that. That was great. I like that analogy.
Yeah, it's amazing how, now that you hear it, how many times you'll go back to it.
Yeah, that's true.
You'll tighten a mental jar all the time and stick it back up on a shelf.
Hey, well, Alayna, it was great having you with us. Thanks so much for joining us. And listener, we'll catch you again next week. Have a good week.
See y'all.